Well, give me a break. You think Roy Cooper, after Chuck Schumer puts $400 million into his U.S. Senate race, if he were to win, he's going to go up there and buck Chuck? Not a chance. Michael Whatley wants this race to be a choice between, are you going to back Trump's policy agenda, or are you going to back Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi?
All right, welcome on into another edition of Tying Together with Tim Boehm. I am Tim Boehm here with producer John McHugh, as always. Quite the show this week, and quite a week we've had, right?
Yeah, very pretty busy week on a bunch of different levels, and nice little inside baseball kind of behind the scenes show for you today. Yeah,
so last week, Roy Cooper officially entered the U.S. Senate race, something we've been waiting on months to figure out what was going to happen. Michael Watley, the Republican National Committee chairman, former NCGOP chairman, he entered the race all last week. Not a quiet summer, John.
No, we don't get those. We don't get those anymore.
What do you make of these guys entering the race?
I mean, look, Cooper, like you said, it's been forever. We've been thinking about it. Watley, it's not surprising, but it is interesting that that's where the party landed. I don't think they're upset about it. I think they thought they might have had better chances.
I think a lot of them wanted Laura Trump.
Correct. I think that, because that is very easy to sell as a slam dunk. Watley is a good candidate. I just think it's going to take a little bit more, which, they're obviously they're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So to help us break this down, someone that those of you in the political world know well, his name is Jim Blaine, Republican operative, got his start and was the right-hand man for Senator Phil Berger, who's the Senate President Pro Tem, arguably the most powerful person in the state. Behind the scenes, he has been a power broker for a long time, part of the differentiators right now with his own firm. As you'll hear, he's not part of this race yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. Had you met him before?
I don't, in passing,
yeah,
maybe, but never had a conversation, never been around for those kind of talks.
Yeah, he's fascinating. He can rile up people sometimes too, but I find him uniquely honest. He's obviously skewed towards his side and what he believes, but pretty great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, tells it like he sees it, which, is super admirable and makes for a really, really good conversation.
Yeah, gold for us, as always. So here is the one and only Jim Blaine. Jim, it's good to see you again. Are you gonna? I should ask you just on the record. Are you gonna play a role in this race at all? I don't know.
As of now, no. But if they spend $500 to $1 billion and I don't manage to at least get a token internship somewhere, I'm gonna be really disappointed.
It's gonna be like the Hunger Games for people trying to get in on this.
Well, Hunger Games. I mean, it's like it's like a dragon on top of a pile of gold. There should be enough to keep everybody happy.
Is that what you think too? About $500 million to a bill?
I don't know. I think. North Carolina historically has had really expensive Senate races. Going back to Hunt Helms, that was the most expensive Senate race in American history, inflation adjusted, for 30 years until 2014 when Hagan and Tillis topped it. And then Tillis and Cunningham set the record. And now I think one of the Georgia runoff races, maybe from 2020, is the most.
I was looking $400 million range.
Yeah, this is in the high $400 million, I think, is the current. And bear in mind, there's so much dark money now that's really anything you see out there publicly is probably low. And there's just not a lot of other competitive Senate races this year. There are not a lot of other competitive U.S. House races because the country's so polarized and most districts are either solidly Republican or solidly Democratic. So there's a lot of money out there, and there are very few places for it to go. And if the Democrats are going to have any chance of taking back the U.S. Senate, arguably even if they lose this seat, it's really hard for them to take back the U.S. Senate. But there's no path without a win here. So this is going to be ground zero. Not a lot of places to spend your money, a whole lot of money to spend. I'm betting on a new U.S. Senate spending record in this race, Tim. How much? I mean, $1 billion.
That's
I'm not quite
even
sure
wrap your head around, right?
I can't even think how you would spend cumulatively $1 billion. I'm sure there's a way, and given enough time, I'd be willing to
try to figure it out.
Try and figure out, how to spend at least half of that. But I mean, that is just insane amount of money. I mean,
Think about how much we can take down the national debt if we stop spending so much money on campaigns.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, if that much money is spent, y'all need to be asking for raises because y'all are going to be the beneficiaries of it.
Well, I don't think it'll trickle down quite that way, probably.
Tim's got a new Mercedes. Thank you, whoever the new senator is.
Let's start this with Tillis. What did you think about his decision and sort of how this evolved? Because he hired staff, including Trump people, earlier this year and was raising a ton of money.
First, let me be clear. Like I like Thom Tillis a lot, and I worked really hard over the years with Senator Berger and Republican legislative politicians to take the majority for the first time, and Thom Tillis was an instrumental part of that. And then he was really, I think, an underappreciated driver in the efficiency of plowing the Republican agenda through during the 4 years he was there. I've always, Senator Berger is probably much more philosophical than Speaker Tillis was, but Speaker Tillis was an operations guy and just chop, chop, chop. He's like, okay, well, this is where we're going and let's go. And this is how we're going to get there. And so I think he's probably, his influence on the shift in North Carolina politics from his time in the legislature is probably underappreciated. I think his time in the U.S. Senate has been a little more challenging, but politics at the federal level has been a lot more challenging. And he has just gotten into a situation, and it's a thankless job, where all the Democrats hated him because he was a Republican. Most people in the middle get tired of folks. And I think, you just can't keep people in the middle happy once you've got a extensive record. And, some of his votes had upset the furthest right portions of the Republican Party base. And I think he would have had, I think he had a pathway to win. We do a lot of polling. Most of it's not publicly released. He was going to have some challenges. And I mean, also, he's been doing this for a long time. Understand, like, you really want to go through what we just talked about, a $500 billion race, when most of the money is going to be spent beyond the control of the candidates in all likelihood through outside spending and dark money. And the man's had a heck of a career, and I can't really fault him for just kind of walking away at this point in time. But I also think there's an argument that Republicans are better off with a clean slate. Republican Party today is the party of Trump. Love it, hate it. Different people in the party feel different ways about it. It's a fact. And if you are not comfortable with that and can't run with as a Trump Republican, because that's what the party is, you're gonna have a hard time. And I think this gives the party a chance to reset. I think Michael Watley, much more in the Ted Budd mold than the Thom Tillis mold, probably easier. I think the campaign setup is probably easier for Republicans because you're not going to have the tension between the sitting president and the leader of the party and the prospective nominee for U.S. Senate in the state.
You mentioned the far right and the grassroots. There's a lot of people that are a little uneasy about Watley, though, right? Like, they consider him Tillis 2 and all that kind of stuff. Do you think that goes away?
Well, both, the loudest portions of the Democratic base and the loudest portions of the Republican base, and they're not necessarily reflective of a large group of people, but they're the people that scream the loudest on social media. They're attention hounds. The part of their shtick and part of their brand is nobody is good. And so, sure, Watley's not going to be sufficiently conservative for them or sufficiently Trumpian. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that he was like one of the first guys I ever knew that was for Trump way back in 2015.
Yeah.
You can't trust Trump. They're going to be telling Trump you can't trust him. I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's laughable.
I think he literally might have been the first person.
Oh, yeah.
At least organizationally that was with him.
And I mean, we can talk about Watley in a second, but the point is, arguably, I think both Tillis and his legacy are probably better off for not having run this race. And I think arguably the Republican Party's prospects are improved by changing candidates.
How are they improved in a general election?
Well, again, Tillis, the problem is, Tillis was independent. I mean, he's always been a bit of a maverick and something of a contrarian. But those traits are not rewarded in politics right now. 15 years ago, he may have been like John McCain, who was generally admired for being a maverick. Today, if you're not 100% with one side, like the Democrats gave him no credit for asking questions at all. I mean, increasingly at the federal level in particular, it's different for an executive branch office, but for a legislative office at the federal level, it's really like a parliamentary election. In Europe, it's, which team are you on? Like, you're not an independent person. And this is going to be a problem, I think, for Roy Cooper, is when you're electing a governor, you're electing a person who is going to be in charge of the executive branch of the state. And that individual is going to be making decisions. When you're electing a member of a legislative body, especially in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House, you're electing a member of a team. And the expectation generally, because politics has become so polarized, is that you will be a loyal team member. And, I think that's what people are looking for these days. And again, I think for Watley, with the base, there's going to be a lot more comfort about that. He's clearly Trump. I don't think there's any base enthusiasm problem for Watley. But I think for Cooper, a lot of his brand has been, I'm not quite Chuck Schumer or AOC or Nancy Pelosi. Well, give me a break. You think Roy Cooper, after Chuck Schumer puts $400 million into his U.S. Senate race, if he were to win, he's going to go up there and buck Chuck? Not a chance. He's going to do whatever he's told to. He's going to be a freshman. First term senator. He's going to be sitting on the back bench, and they're going to say, we need your vote. And he's going to go, yes, sir.
The Watley part, what's interesting is I think a lot of people thought Tillis would be a better candidate because he can win more of the middle that people expect. So do you believe that Watley can do that, or do you think he'll get a better turnout among the base that will make up for that potentially?
So a couple of points on that, Tim. Midterm elections are not really usually about persuading people in the middle. They're lower turnout than presidential election. More passive voters or less interested voters don't participate in midterm elections. Turnout in North Carolina presidential election these days like 75%. Turnout in a midterm is going to be, it was very high compared to historically, but it's going to be in the probably low 50s. So you've got this whole group of people that feels an obligation to go vote in a presidential election and maybe has some affinity for one candidate or the other candidate running for president. And then down ballot, first of all, there's drop off in presidential year. Some people just go vote for president, say that's my civic duty, go home. Others, then of these more passive voters, these are really the ones that are persuadable. They may say, I saw a good TV ad, or I like that guy, or I saw something really bad about this guy on the internet. And, those are your swing voters. In a midterm, it's almost always your most grizzled partisans, and it's about who can get them out. So I think it's debatable whether or not Tillis could win more people in the middle in a presidential year than Watley could. I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Well, we won't know. We will never know. But I do think Watley solves some of the base enthusiasm problems, and whichever party gets their base out is most likely to win this upcoming election. And I think Watley is really well aligned with Trump. I can't think of a candidate, frankly, that's better aligned with him, and I think he's going to do pretty well on that front.
What do you think about the fact that he's never run for office before? It's kind of interesting.
It's a double-edged sword, just like Cooper's 40-year career politician type.
It's like polar opposites, right?
Right. I mean, you could not have maybe he's inexperienced, you could say, for Watley. On the flip side, he doesn't have 40 years of voting record, executive record, litigation record that can be used against him. So, it's really, really fascinating, the setup there. You really could not have two candidates with more different backgrounds.
I should say, too, though, Watley has been, I think going back to high school, he worked on Jesse. Like, he's been in campaigns for decades.
And I think he's probably underappreciated as an operative. You look at the performance of the NCGOP under his leadership. He was really effective in taking back and really an important part of taking back control of the state courts for Republicans. He made sure that the apparatus was in place for the state house and state senate to be successful. He was an integral part of the turnout effort for Ted Budd's win in 2022. North Carolina was the only swing state in 2020 that Trump hung on to, and I think part of that's the infrastructure he put in place. He's not loud, he's not flashy, he doesn't draw attention to himself. He's smart, savvy operator, and you have to appreciate, he just basically came from nowhere to being the presumptive nominee to U.S. Senate in 8 years, and you probably never heard about him. You have to be very effective behind the scenes and within your party infrastructure to basically have everybody say, all right, you're the guy.
Well, so speaking of that, by the way, Cooper's not flashy either, which could help him overcome some of that internally. The lack of name recognition and people not knowing him outside of our world, how does he overcome that, do you think? Is it just relentless being out money?
And he's going to have to go out and build his name identification and let people know who he is. There's some question like whether, in my mind, there are a couple of gadfly type candidates that are still saying they're going to run for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. If you want to know how the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate is going to go and how determinative the Trump endorsement is, you don't really need to look any further back than 2022 when our former governor, Pat McCrory, was up 50 points on Ted Budd and ended up losing by 30. 80-point swing. And Budd's main thing that he had was the blessing and stamp of approval from President Trump. And anybody that thinks they're going to beat Watley in a primary, and you're seeing all the credible people and smart people, basically bow out of the race. Congressman Harrian, the folks that were talking about it have, I think, understand that that's determinative.
Do you think it'd been much different with a Laura Trump or a Pat Harrigan on the ballot?
I don't know enough about Harrigan to say. He looks the part, and early returns on his performance are good. Flip side, I don't think he's probably got the national fundraising network that Watley has. While he has been elected, I'm not sure that I actually think he is more experienced politically in terms of what has to happen and how to put together what has to be put together to successfully execute a U.S. Senate race. Laura Trump was a really interesting candidate to me. High risk, high reward. I think Watley's probably got a higher floor. She hadn't lived in the state in a while. Obviously, Trump name is really a powerful thing.
There's been so much emphasis on their finances and whatnot too.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, she's got young kids and has this Fox
I never
News
thought
show.
she was going to run.
And I have no insight into that, but I think Watley is a good landing place for the Republican Party. If you think about it, he's really in line with the people that have been successful in North Carolina. When Republicans get candidates that are a little too exciting, we tend to have had problems in statewide elections recently.
Who could you be talking about?
I just can't think of it, but I can't recall their names. But you know,
his online name.
No, I can't recall that one either. But you know, you've got if you look at the track records, Ted Budd. You look at like the Dave Bullocks, the Brad Breiners, the Luke Farleys, Mike Causey, Steve Troxler. Now, these are guys that fit in pretty well with the populist Trump Republican Party, but they are not like really, you know, they're not trying to get Marjorie Taylor Greene level attention on social media. And that model has been really successful for Republicans. And I think Watley fits pretty comfortably into that lane. And I think Republicans are in a pretty good spot. And also not having a primary, like
This is
a
gonna be a
real
long general
full-fledged knockdown drag out race that, you know, makes you take, you know, maybe positions that are not helpful for your general election.
That's why I think it's going to be relatively quiet for the next 5 months, probably. They're just going to put the head down and
If
raise
you're
money.
going to spend $1 billion, it's not going to be quiet.
Well, yeah, they got to
for
raise
the
it
next-
first.
Well, I mean, I see stuff yesterday. It was like Watley already raised 7 figures in one day. Cooper raised, you know, dump truck full of money. I mean, it sounds like they're raising it. Once they start raising it, it won't be too long before they start spending.
Watley needs
it.
to probably for that name recognition issue too. All right,
Well, but again, Cooper has the Cooper has a chance to go out and define Watley because Watley is not defined. So,
which Morgan and his team, that's what they like to do.
well, they learned their lesson in 2020.
All right, Cooper. So were you surprised that he ended up running or no? Or
If I was him, I would not have done it. I think he has, well, 2 things. One, I think Jeff Jackson would have been a better candidate.
a better candidate than Cooper?
Absolutely.
Why?
I think he appeals to the modern Democratic Party at the end of the day more, is a better communicator. He's slick and is as arguably as strong a fundraiser as Cooper is. And the other thing, too, is Cooper's really putting a lot on the line here.
He's never lost an election.
And I'm not sure, again, this isn't, voters don't, a couple of things about Cooper. One, he has had the absolute most valuable trait any politician can have, and that is an exquisite sense of timing. And in politics, if you're, you know, trying to run for office, you'll take timing over planning every day of the week. I mean, he didn't even get an opponent in 2012 when he ran for AG. You know, 2008 was a great. He's really faced one good candidate in his AG runs. First one, Dan Boyce, and that ended up being a pretty close race. And then he had a close race against Pat McCrory, but McCrory's campaign was a mess until the guy that actually ran Trump's campaign, Chris LaCivita, was brought in to kind of fix it with about a year to go. But they lost 3 years in terms of getting organized. And then, you know, McCrory ended up losing by 10,000 votes. And there are million little things. I think McCrory lost that race more than Cooper won it. And then in 2020, I mean, Forrest, you spent $2 million on TV, and I mean, I arguably think Forrest might have been the best, if he had been elected, probably would have been the best governor North Carolina's had this century. But, you know, he just didn't get going on the campaign front, and Cooper just buried him under $40-50 million spending advantage. When you have this much money on the table, that spending advantage that has been so important and so determinative to Cooper's victories, both against McCrory in these AG races and against Forrest, he's not going to have a 5, 10, 15 to 1 spending advantage.
You think it'll be pretty even?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Cooper will have more on the campaign side, I suspect, than Watley, but I suspect outside spending will level the playing field. The stakes are just too high for it not to. And I mean, Watley's raised, was involved in raising $400 million for the president's effort at the national level in 2024 for the inaugural. I mean, he has deep national fundraising connections with people that can write really big checks to level the playing field.
I can't wait to talk to Governor Cooper to find out though what, and I'm sure he won't tell me, but like really what was, because I do feel like he probably didn't want to run, but I do think the saving the country and the party got to him. And then when Tillis got out, I wonder if that was the final nail in the coffin or if the decision was made before then. That's what I want to know.
I don't know. I feel like it's been drifting in that direction for a while. But the other thing, too, about Cooper is, there's a ton of stuff that, and it's not that the media hasn't reported on a fair amount of it. It just hasn't been amplified. I mean, he's had some questions around, ethics. You've got, like we were talking before we came on the air, it's like you just go to a line at the DMV and, if you like what Roy Cooper did with the DMV, you're going to love what he's going to do in the U.S. Senate. You've got, there's just so much stuff. I mean, I have people texting me, newspaper clips from his 1988, state house race campaign stuff. And he's like, he's going to regret he said this.
But why wouldn't that have come out in previous
Nobody's had
races?
any money against him. I mean, Dan Boyce had a legitimate campaign against him. After that, I mean, he just buried Joe Knott. He buried Bob Crumley in a great year. He didn't even have an opponent in 2012. McCrory's McCrory, God bless him. And then Forrest didn't run any ads, and the RGA didn't play. I mean, arguably the only year he's really taken any incoming fire was 2000, where he won with 51% of the vote and change. And in 2016, where he won by 10,000 votes.
So here's my question then, because
so I think there's a lot of new information that old information that is going to be presented to voters about Roy Cooper that has been out there for a long time. I mean, all these people whose sentences he commuted on the way out the door.
I mean, the first text I saw was about his daughter, which is, family already.
For
better, for worse. I don't
know why you go after his daughter. I've never really understood that. But I mean, he gave incentives to Chinese companies that, huge incentives to Chinese companies that then didn't deliver. I mean, there's just all these things.
So how do you package that? I mean, you do this for a living. Because I wonder, like you said, he has not had tough races. And so they've had 40 years of knowing him, of who he is. Does this stuff all of a sudden stick? Do people buy it, do you think?
Well, again, I think it's going to be new information to them, even though you and I may go, oh, I remember reading that in the News and Observer back in 2009. Man, think about all the people that didn't even live in the state then that are voters today. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be a raft of what appears to be new information that is introduced to the electorate about Cooper that he's never really had to confront before. And, he's always had, no offense, but, pretty complacent fawning media coverage here in state. I mean, it's, oh, Roy, we love him.
We love him. I never said I love Roy
I'm
Cooper.
not saying you, but I mean, that I would describe that as the general tone of the media coverage. And
the national press will definitely be different. I mean, they just are compared to any local
they're
media.
wild animals, right? It's all clickbait these days. So the crazier story you can get out there, the better. And they'll find some, I'm sure. But again, the other challenge he has is Cooper wants this race to be a decision between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. Michael Watley wants this race to be a choice between, are you going to back Trump's policy agenda, or are you going to back Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Ilhan Omar? Are you going to back their agenda nationally? And in a race for an executive office, it's much easier to make the race about the person that is going to be making the decisions. There's not a universe in which Watley or Cooper is fully in control of making their own decisions once they get to Washington. They're going to be on a team, and they're going to be expected to back that team. And I think, as we've seen in legislative races, as the state and the country have gotten more ideologically, polarized and aligned, it's going to be really hard for Cooper to draw a distinction with the national. He said so many things too. Like, people send me these clips, like stuff he said about Joe Biden and Harris. Yeah, you got a clip. Something he said about Bill Clinton.
I mean, he introduced Kamala Harris at the convention.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like he is going to be a national Democrat, I think, at the end of the day. And the question is, this is midterm election 2026. It's going to be a tougher cycle for Republicans. It usually is for the party in power. But North Carolina hasn't elected a Democratic senator since 2008, when Obama won the state.
Which was the first time since 1976.
Correct. So, say what you will, North Carolina's going to be competitive. It's going to be close. But I think at the end of the day, the state, especially at the federal level, tends to be maybe not red, but, at least a kind of light pink my four girls like to wear around.
So let me
and
ask
occasionally put their father in.
Are there pictures of this? I don't know if I want to ask about that.
You and Aaron maybe can talk offline.
So we do this every cycle where we talk about all these issues. The Medicaid expansion is going to come up. Hurricane recovery is going to come up, whether it's 2016, 2018, or 2024. Yeah, 2024. I'm trying to keep my ears straight. And all these side issues. But at the end of the day, it's going to be nationalized, right? And it's going to be a referendum on the Trump agenda one way or the other.
I think
and the economy.
That's my expectation. And I think those two things go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
If the economy is going well, that represents the Trump agenda. If it's going poorly, that's going to represent the Trump agenda. So a lot of it will be driven by people's perception of the economy, which will then
always is that way, no matter what.
Which will then reflect their perception of the effectiveness of the Trump agenda. But the other thing too is, social and cultural issues have really started to swing against Democrats because my perspective on it is just their utter lack of common sense as it relates to like girls and boys and girls locker rooms and boys playing girls sports, and,
which are already hitting Cooper on, by the way, online.
Right. And, there's a bunch of those issues have really are increasingly important in terms of people's perception of whether or not a politician is hostile to Christianity. All these things are things that Cooper has a record on that makes him look much more like an Elizabeth Warren or a Nancy Pelosi or a Joe Biden, but he's never really been called on it. And there's so much money, as we've talked about here. He's going to get called on all these things. And so I just don't think old Roy, the guy that, people are sending me his campaign ads from 1988, and he's talking about how we're going to lock everybody up and, we're going to do, welfare reform. I mean, it reads like a Newt Gingrich newspaper ad.
So many people have all these ads.
The other thing, there are a lot of people who have been recently hired, I'm sure, to find them all. So sure, they're all going to get surfaced. But I mean, that guy, the guy that voted with Republicans to, throw the then longest serving speaker of the state house, Liston Ramsey, out of office, that is not who Roy Cooper is today. That's who he was 40 years ago. And I think there's maybe some lingering thought that maybe that's who he is. I think by the time these conservative outside groups, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a referendum on the Trump agenda. And I think at the end of the day, it'll be close, but I kind of like if we can if Republicans can get it to a referendum on the Trump agenda, I think the Republican wins.
Well, so let's end with that. So we were just talking about the day we're taping this. I think it was one of the first polls that came out.
I've seen two kind of floating around on the internet this morning.
Basically, the one I saw,
and I haven't had a chance to really dig into them, so I don't know if they're crap.
But just broadly, Cooper's up 6 in the one that I saw.
There was one I saw.
Politico was.
There was one. There was one I saw. I can't even remember. And again, I have not. There's a lot of crappy polls out there these days. As somebody in the polling business, you get what you pay for. I'll just say that. But I saw one where he was maybe up. Cooper was up 3, and the other where he was up 6. And there were some polls out earlier this year, and numbers that I saw where Cooper was up 10, and that's kind of where I would have expected him to be versus a total unknown like Michael Watley. And the fact that he's below 50% in all these surveys already, and that Watley's within 10 points when Cooper has universal name awareness. I mean, he's got 100%, and everybody knows who Roy Cooper is, and nobody knows who Michael Watley is. I think that is already an indication that this race is nationalizing, and what it really is do you want a Republican supporter of the Trump agenda in the U.S. Senate, or do you want a Democratic supporter of the Schumer, Pelosi, AOC agenda in the U.S. Senate?
He didn't mention Trump in that video. He's trying to focus on economic issues. That's probably what Democrats want to do. I guess the question is whether it works.
It's the smart play. It's what he should be doing. But man, it is going to...
With all the money, it may not matter.
It's going to be hard for him to make it about economics. And remember, he's also in a weird position of trying to take credit for a set of economic policies that's in place in North Carolina that he generally opposed the enactment of. And there's an inconsistency in that argument too that over time can be exposed.
So at the end of the day, this race is probably within 3 points on Election Day, November 2026, right?
Where'd you get your PhD? Look.
The School of Jim Blaine.
all you got to do is average the races where there was,
Bud won easily, and it was 3%, I think.
That's a big win is 3% in North Carolina. Cooper got a quote big win over Farce. He got 51.3%, I think.
Well, the Stein-Robinson is an
Set
outlier.
that aside. No. But every other statewide race in North Carolina last year was within 3%.
So it'll get there.
Well, maybe Troxler won by a little more than that. But even Troxler's margins, and that's the thing is you've seen these margins as North Carolina's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people have moved in. These guys that used to win by 10 or 15 are now winning by 6 or 7. And I think it's just an indication of how tight the state is. But Tim, the other thing that's really important to think about is there's been a huge change in voter registration in North Carolina over the past decade. And I think it's underappreciated. Everybody knows unaffiliateds are now way up here. They're the largest registration group in the state. But what people don't realize is that since 2014, in the last decade, Republican registration has basically stayed somewhere around 30%. Democratic Party registration has fallen from about 44, 45% at that point in time down to 30%. And by the 2026 election, Democrats, who as recently as 20 years ago had over half of all registrants in the state, will probably be the smallest registration group in the state. And people say, well, the unaffiliateds are getting more liberal. That's true. But look, as a Republican operative, I'd take my chances with a registered unaffiliated voter being able to persuade them to vote for a Republican these days over a registered Democrat any day of the week. And so while there is some truth to the argument that maybe the unaffiliated groups are less Republican friendly than they used to be, it's still the registration trends in the state are not particularly friendly to Democratic elected officials. And the question is at some point in time probably catches up to most of them.
Probably next year, maybe even this year.
Could, yeah.
Let's talk Berger for 1 second. You were his chief of staff. You were his right-hand man. He's got this primary now. It's getting a lot of attention. I'm assuming you're involved in it somehow. What do you think? What do you make of all this? And are we making a bigger deal out of it or no?
Well, it's fun to talk about, I think, for a lot of people. Phil Berger is transformative, is the transformative political figure in this state for this century. We talked a little bit about Tillis's role. Tim Moore has had a role. Pat McCrory played some small role. Speaker Hall is now. But the consistent theme in terms of North Carolina Republican politics through this century was Phil Berger getting elected minority leader, I think in 2004, 2005, and building out a really serious political apparatus that ultimately could overcome the Democrats' political apparatus at the state Senate and legislative level, and then has been able to generally sustain that model through some relatively tough elections when we've had Democrats elected statewide and state offices, the highest offices, over and over and over again. And at the same time, he's driven just the most conservative policy agenda you could find probably in an American state in that time period, totally rebuilt the state's economic model. Everybody hears about the tax rates. When Phil got elected president of the state Senate, personal income tax rate in the state, the highest one was 8%. Today it's under 4%, headed for 2% and change. You just do not see that sort of move. North Carolina is going to become the only state other than Alaska in 2030 to actually eliminate an income tax when the corporate income tax, which was over 7% when Phil took over, goes away entirely. The only other state that's done that is Alaska, and they did it when they hit the biggest oil reserves ever found in the United States. They started writing checks to their citizens. They had so much money. But he's totally changed school systems in North Carolina. He's given he's tried to create something of a market in education, where people have school choice. Charter schools were capped. There was no opportunity scholarship program. Today you have explosive growth in charter schools, universal opportunity scholarships. He's extremely committed because of his personal experience to making college education affordable in North Carolina. You haven't seen a tuition increase in North Carolina universities in a decade. You've seen this North Carolina Promise program come into effect, which $500 a semester tuition for people at 5 of the state schools. I mean, he really believes in the economic opportunity that higher education creates. Underappreciated in all this is the amount of money that he's pushed into infrastructure spend in North Carolina. Just billions and billions of additional dollars for roads, particularly. The SCIF funding now, where on a cash basis you're funding public school and public university infrastructure. He's just done all of this stuff. Over time, though, in politics, friends come and go and enemies accumulate. And there's some people that have disagreed with him over the years and don't like what he has done. Most of those people are people that he personally held accountable, or decided that their leadership in various institutions was not the right leadership and moved along. And a couple of them are people that have philosophical disagreements with him. And they've talked to the sheriff up in Rockingham County and running against him. I think by the time, assuming Sam Page files for office, I think by the time that race is over, he may have to move out of the county. I mean, the other thing is he's just, Phil just works so hard. I don't think people appreciate that. When I saw his campaign finance report, there's like $2 million. Stein raised 2.5. I mean, he's highly motivated and really believes in what he's doing. I know there are a few more things he wants to do, so I don't think he's gonna back down or go away. And I think to some extent, some of these people that have access to grind with him have pushed a dupe out into the road, and he's going to get hit by a car.
Well, it's going to be fascinating. Do you want to end with Belichick or anything else?
I will. Yeah, I will end with this. I said this yesterday at the UNC Board of Trustees meeting. John Pryor was the chairman of the Board of Trustees at UNC for the last 2 years, and John is a brash individual with a lot of opinions. And occasionally takes a fair amount of incoming fire, and he would say occasionally deserved. But yesterday was the end of his 2-year term as chairman of the board at Chapel Hill, and I just think, and when people look back on his 2-year tenure, I mean, you've got this skills school that's trying to address that he's really the progenitor of, and really pushed, that's trying to address some of the concerns we've seen that have undermined trust in public universities across the country in terms of ideological balance on campus. He's tried to attack that, not by doing away with liberal faculty, but by creating an environment where there can be competition of ideas. I don't think we would have hired Belichick if John hadn't pushed. And again, I wasn't intimately involved, and I don't pretend to kind of sit there watching, nod my head. But I don't think Chapel Hill would have thought outside the box to hire someone like Belichick. And again, it's a big risk, but it's exciting. I've never seen this much excitement around football at Chapel Hill. And then again, I think John's lasting legacy is going to be the hiring of Lee Roberts, who I think just has this amazing vision for what UNC can be for the next 100 years, and how we can't rest on our laurels and be complacent, how we have to change what we're doing to be relevant for another 200 years. And I mean, I think in the 2 years he was there, it's just crazy, Tim, how much. It's been wild.
Even outside of Chapel Hill,
sometimes you feel like when you're in the car, riding with him, you're hanging on for dear life. What are we doing? But I think he's really set up the school and deserves some credit for that.
He
stepped on some toes on the doing it, but
they sold a lot of tickets already. Now they just got to win.
Yeah, I bought more tickets this year. I'm taking all the girls.
That's a lot of tickets.
That's a lot of tickets.
Jim, good to see you. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to see you too.
If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, check out the Tying It Together YouTube channel in the description. Hit subscribe and let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.